Hello, welcome to all those who are online with us today. We appreciate you being here. Welcome to each and every one of you. Thank you for coming back. Today's agenda, we're looking to review Daniel 5 very briefly, like a 3-minute review. Start Daniel 6 and hopefully finish Daniel 6. The objective is to see God's power to save. God's power to save. So, last week we tackled the last half of Daniel chapter 5. What happened in the last part of Daniel chapter 5? What did we see?
Handwriting on the wall.
Yeah, there was handwriting on the wall, right? Who's called in to interpret? Daniel. Daniel gives the interpretation. That very night, the prophecy or the handwriting on the wall is fulfilled. Belshazzar, the Chaldean king, was killed. Darius the Mede received the kingdom being about 62 years old. Okay, Darius the Mede is most likely the same as Cyrus, King Cyrus of Persia. He's going to be the one who releases the Jews from Babylon back to Jerusalem. I think that's where we'll stop today for that subject. We could go further, but I really want to dig into chapter 6. Did we start chapter 6 last week? I don't think we did. No. All right. Let's go ahead and dig into chapter 6 then. Daniel chapter 6, verses 1 through 5. Could I have one person please read verses 1 through 5 for us? Daniel chapter 6, verses 1 through 5.
It pleased Darius to set over the kingdom 120 princes, which would be over the whole kingdom, and over these 3 presidents, of whom Daniel was first, that the princes should give an account to them, and the king should have no damage. Then this Daniel was preferred above the presidents and the princes, because an excellent spirit was in him, and the king thought to set him over the whole realm. Then the presidents and the princes sought to find occasion against Daniel according to the kingdom. But they could not find anything and fault. For as much as he was faithful, neither was there any error or fault found in him. Then said these men, we shall not find any occasion against this Daniel, except we find it against him concerning the law of God.
Excellent. Thank you. So let's start to talk here about Darius and see here in verses 1 and 2. What do you see here in verses 1 and 2? Daniel chapter 6, verses 1 and 2. Go ahead.
Setting up his kingdom.
Yeah, Darius is setting up the kingdom, right? He's organizing it. The KJV has princes, that's fine. Other versions might have officials or satraps. Satraps. What's a satrap?
Isn't it an official?
Yeah, it's an official. That's right, it's an official. Technically, they would have been, it literally means protector of the realm. So it's a high official, but it's most likely not as high as protector of the realm, right? So you're talking about official, a prince, it gets the point across very well. Something like that works here. So there's 120. Here's just a bonus for you. In Esther chapter 1:1, Esther takes place about 50 years after Daniel. At that time, there's about 127 satraps. All right, so there's about 127. So the kingdom was expanding. You would naturally see that sort of growth in such a huge kingdom. And so that's an interesting fact for us. Okay. Let's see. Over these 120, who does he set? He actually sets 3 high officials, right? Verse 2, and over them 3 high officials, of whom Daniel was one. So Daniel was one of the 3 that kind of organized, administrated, you could say ruled over, but probably administrated is better, administrated over these 120 satraps. All right? You can imagine each one probably had, what, the math is about 40 per high official.
So how is it that Daniel got this privilege Well, we got a brand new king, a brand new government set up.
Yeah, excellent. So how does Daniel get the privilege? Right, we have a brand new king. Daniel's not known to the prince of Persia, or the king of Persia, or the king of the Medes, however we want to say that, the Medes-Persia kingdom. He's not known to him. Let's take a look in verse 3. Oh wait, let's not take a look at verse 3 yet, because verse 3 is going to be after that. How does he get that high privilege? Well, it's a good question. Maybe it's related to the fact that he became the third in the empire back in verse 29. Maybe it's just the Spirit of God working, which I think that can work in with a whole bunch of different historical factors in this moment. Yeah, a lot of different things there could be happening. So, what do you all think? How would have Daniel have gotten become one of the three high officials?
I just figured Darius must have asked people or heard about Daniel and thought that he might be, since he was in the other government, thought maybe he would be a good person to have.
Yeah, maybe Darius is looking for people to take into his kingdom, making rulers over it, both maybe for the goodwill of the subjects and for his benefit. You know, Daniel is somebody who knows the kingdom, probably inside and out. He's been in high leadership positions for 65 years or something like that. You know, so maybe that's it. Yeah, who knows? But there we go ahead.
I like to believe it's the hand of God.
Yeah, the hand of God, absolutely. And the hand of God can be seen behind, and we should see it, behind any number of hypothetical examples that we could give for the elevation of Daniel, right? So the hand of God is there, just like the hand of God has been with Daniel all along, right? Daniel was, all along the hand of God's been with Daniel, so. Good. All right.
Similar to Joseph.
Yeah, so Daniel's story is pretty similar to Joseph in many regards. Here's another one of those elevations sort of things, where God is clearly seen. Good. All right, let's take a look then here at verse 3. What does Daniel do?
Distinguished himself.
Distinguished himself. How?
An excellent spirit in him.
Yeah, he had an excellent spirit in him, right? That's how he did. What does it mean to have an excellent spirit in the book of Daniel?
Trustworthy.
Okay, yeah, so part of it's going to be about his character. He's going to be trustworthy, highly capable, right? Wise and intelligent. What has it also been meaning here in the book of Daniel, specifically outside of character?
His trust in the Lord.
Yeah, it's the trust in the Lord, and specifically the kings of Babylon have been referring to him as a man with the spirit of the holy gods in him. Right, and so it's a reference also to the Holy Spirit dwelling in Daniel, or God being with Daniel in great power. Okay, so we shouldn't see those two as things that you have to have one or the other. It's both. Okay, he has both of those things. He has the character, trustworthiness, belief in God, man of high capability and wisdom. And he has God with him in power, giving him all of those things. Good. What does the king plan to do with Daniel because of his excellent spirit, because he's distinguished? Still in verse 3.
Well, he wants him over the whole kingdom.
Yeah, want him over the whole kingdom. Why would, this is a little bit different than the USA today, why would a king want a really super capable official over the whole kingdom?
Well, he needed somebody to depend on, not him.
Okay, yeah, so number one, he wants somebody to depend on. What else?
Makes him look like a better king.
Makes him look like a better king. Sure. Good. What else?
The people liked him.
Okay, the people might have liked him. Yeah, absolutely. What else?
Give the king time to do other things.
Bingo. Give the king time to do other stuff, right? Well, if you're a king or a queen and you had the pressures of the whole kingdom or queendom upon you, wouldn't you just love to say, here you go. I'm going to go drink and eat and feast and do whatever I want to do, right? And that's part of the idea here. You know, the king would obviously still have some role, but he wants to put the kingdom on somebody else's shoulders because being that high up and having everything on us would be extremely pressurized, right? We can even see that in the presidents of the U.S., right? I mean, just how much pressure they are under. That's a lot. It's a lot to run a country. It's a lot to run a kingdom. Okay?
It says he was faithful, so he must have been known to be faithful and everything, so.
Yeah. Excellent. What are you using the ESV or?
I don't know what this is.
Okay.
It's one you had back here.
Perfect. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. That's the ESV. What verse are you looking at there for
It's
faithfulness?
down in the bottom of the page.
Okay, excellent. Yep, so in verse 4, we're going to go there. Yep, okay, very good. So let's turn to verse 4, and that's where we're being directed, which is awesome. The high officials and all the other princes, so you have 2 plus 120, so about 122, or maybe if the high officials were part of the 120, you have 119 people coming against Daniel, trying to find grounds for complaint. But they could not because he was faithful, so he was loyal. That's what you were saying, which is excellent. No error or fault was found in him. This does not mean that he was sinless. It just means that there is no error or fault in his administration. Right? Now, Daniel is righteous. We need to emphasize that. But there's only one sinless person in the world, and that's Jesus Christ. Right? So Daniel is in compliance with the Judah law. He's going to not be intentionally sinning, most likely, but he would still have some sin, but there's no error or fault found in him. Okay? So we need to just kind of parse that out there. Very good. Let's do verse 5, then we'll take questions and other comments. What do we see in verse 5?
Well, they realized that he had no fault that they could find, but they said agreed having over the whole kingdom.
Well, they agreed that there was no fault that they could find, but in verse 5, what do? They say, unless we're going to find it in connection with the law of his God, right? So now their wheels are turning. They're going to frame this dude, right? I mean, that's what they're setting it up, okay?
Little jealousy there, probably.
Yes, absolutely. A little jealousy, absolutely. Joyce Baldwin says this: Daniel is subjected to a trial like his friends. Remember that his friends went into the burning furnace. But he was not going to trial for resisting a sin. Daniel is not resisting a sin here, but instead, Daniel will be on trial for a positive duty that he will not stop. A positive duty that he will not stop. And so there's a little bit of a difference, right? Daniel's 3 friends refused to bow down to an idol. Okay, that's resisting a sin. Daniel is going to be told to stop praying, but he will continue to pray. Okay, and so it's that we get the twofold ways of being a saint in Daniel, right? One is to keep doing the actions that we should be doing. The other is to resist sinful actions. Okay, so that's a little bit of a highlight of a difference there between Daniel and his friends. Both are ultimately positive examples. What questions do you have for us? Or what comments, what insights do you have?
This is a common tactic of the enemy, isn't it?
Yeah, this is a common tactic of the enemy, right? And The enemy's tactics are always either to tempt to sin, or if not, to then destroy you by making you stop doing something that you should be doing. What are
Accusations.
Yeah, and accusations, right? So what is Satan? Does anybody know what Satan literally means in the Hebrew?
Liar.
Hasatan. Actually, it doesn't mean liar, actually.
Okay.
Hasatan, or Satan, literally means the accuser. The accuser. He's the one that stands and accuses the saints. And so if we were to go to Zechariah chapter 3, right? I saw the high priest Joshua standing before the throne, and Hasatan, Satan, standing there and making accusations against him, right? And so Satan accuses the saints. How many people have ever experienced accusations in your life? Anyone ever feel guilty or shame?
I got accused of cheating on when I was in the 6th grade.
Okay.
And it really hurt me because I didn't cheat, but because I had the same answers on my page as the other girl did.
Sure.
And I really liked my teacher, and she accused me of that, and I said I didn't.
Sure.
But
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. Yep. But yeah, we get accused of stuff, and we accuse ourselves, don't we? Right? We bring a lot of guilt into ourselves. That is actually like having the mind of Satan. And we are to have whose mind?
Jesus.
We are to have the mind of Christ, right? From the book of Philippians. Put on the mind of Christ. Well, the mind of Christ, there is no condemnation. Now, that is not license to sin. It just means we don't condemn ourselves for stuff. That's Satan's job. What we do is we're honest, and we do what? We repent, we confess, we receive the forgiveness, and we move on. Okay? So that's just a little plug in there. But yeah, so the enemy's strategy is to tempt, to accuse, and to try to get you to not do stuff that you should be doing. Okay? Has anybody had this experience of starting a Bible reading plan?
Starting, yeah.
Yeah. We have the experience of starting, don't we? And then so quickly we end it, or just, life just happens and chaos happens, and if we don't press through, then actually most normally we stop.
and Leviticus
Right.
happens.
And Leviticus happens. Leviticus, folks, yeah, so Leviticus happens. We've done a sermon series on Leviticus here. It was called Selected Passages of Leviticus. It was not every single verse, but it was just selected passages. When you get to Leviticus, go get that sermon series from the library, play it along, because Leviticus is one of the most important books of the Bible. And yet, since it's so hard to understand, we so easily stop. Right? But it's actually one of the most essential books of the Bible. So we've got to keep doing it. We started. I was tremendously convicted. Listened to a sermon about family worship, having a daily time of family worship with singing and prayer, scripture, and a little bit of more singing at the end. And it doesn't have to be long, maybe 10, 15, 20 minutes, this guy was saying. But every day, family worship. I was so convicted after hearing the sermon. I haven't been this convicted in years about stuff. Because a lot of the time you hear the same stuff and you're like, yes, that's true. But sometimes the conviction I was convicted about family worship. So I bought his book, read his book. I was like, all right, now we know how to do it. We begin the implementation, and chaos breaks out for the next week. Everything that things that I will not even say happened that week. Like attacks on our children at school, and just chaos happened. And my wife and I were just like, how do we handle this? And I'm just like, we've just got to continue family worship. No matter what else drops, that has to remain in place, because what the enemy is doing is trying to stop us. That's what the enemy is doing. And so we pressed on, we kept on going, and now the skies have cleared, so to speak. Right now we're feeling a bit more peace, and we have that established practice. Okay? But whenever you start something, the enemy will attack. try to get you to stop doing it. Right? And that's with everything. Stopping a sin, starting a devotion, starting reading a book, all of that sort of stuff. Alrighty, I'm off my soapbox. What other comments, questions do you have for me? I got a soapbox this last Wednesday in Bible study. I think we got through 2 verses. Oh man, it was slow. I was up on a soapbox. All right, I'm a preacher. Let's go. Daniel chapter 6, verse 6 through 9. Can I have one person please read Daniel chapter 6, verses 6 through 9 for us, please?
So the administrators and the satraps went as a group to the king and said, O King Darius, live forever. The royal administrators, prefects, satraps, advisors, and governors have all agreed that the king should issue an edict and enforce the decree that anyone who prays to any god or man during the king should issue the edict and enforce the decree that anyone who prays to any god or man during the next 30 days, except to you, O king, shall be thrown into the lion's den. Now, O king, issue the decree and put it in writing so that it cannot be altered, in accordance with the laws of the Medes and Persians, which cannot be repealed. So King Darius put the decree in writing.
Excellent, thank you. Notice it sounds so good to Darius. And the officials are tricking him. Right. Now there's a few things. This section is sort of self-explanatory, so why don't you give your comments and then I'll go over a detail or two that we may not know. What do you see in verses 6 through 9? Yeah, they had it all planned out and thought out about how they were going to trap Daniel, didn't they? Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Notice this, just like in Esther, the law of the Medes and the Persians cannot be repealed, which is fascinating. But we also find that in the book of Esther. The king says, well, I can't repeal the decree to kill all the Jews, but what we can do is say the Jews can arm themselves. Right? That happens in Esther chapter 9, maybe into chapter 10. And Mordecai makes that ruling for them. Okay? What else do we see? Den of lions. This might be more like a pit of lions or something. But he's caged some lions up somehow. Joyce Baldwin says this on page 315, paraphrase. She says, Persian kings were known to have power of capital punishment, and they were known for their almost exquisitely horrible forms of execution. Right? So the Romans have the worst with the cross. But getting eaten by hungry lions is pretty terrible. I mean, that's pretty...
Is that the main reason why there was lions?
Probably that's why he was keeping him around, and obviously he's not feeding him a whole lot based on what happens next. So yes, yep. I mean, maybe he just did it because he could. I want some cats. Go get me big ones. How are we gonna keep them? I don't know. Just do something. Put them in a den. Put them in a pit. I don't care. Just want to walk by and see him once in a while. He's king. He can do that. Right? Who knows?
Makes you wonder what kind of a personality Darius was to think up all this stuff. I mean, he seemed to be in compliance with what they were doing, signed it, and he could have said no.
Most conquerors are interesting case studies for their headspace. We just don't know that much about Darius.
That probably don't fit his ego.
Oh, probably. Yep. Most conquerors who want to expand kingdoms have large egos to be satisfied. Right? Here's how big the Persian Empire was. This is a quote from Joyce Baldwin on page 140. The Persian Empire, which incorporated that of the Medes, a vast forming. That doesn't make any sense. My letters are too close together. I think it's a vast forming, or to the north of the Babylonian territories, extending eventually to Asia Minor, Libya, and Egypt to the west, and to the Indus River and the Aral Sea to the east. It was the largest empire the world had yet seen, hence the urgent need for one efficient organization from the very beginning. Okay, right? So, or an efficient organization from the very beginning. So this empire is just massive. It's the biggest one the world has ever seen at this time. Right? Then the Romans are going to come in, or the Greeks will come in, then the Romans will come in, and their empires are bigger. But this empire is huge. Okay? When you have that kind of territory and that kind of power, have a big ego. It takes someone with a massive ego to say, I think it's a good idea for everyone to pray to me for 30 days. Right? And that's what he does. You know, I think that's a good idea. Right. It is 10:02 a.m. Thank you, Siri. Wonder where that came from. I heard a sound like Siri saying it is 10:02 a.m.
That must have been the same noise I heard this morning.
Okay.
It might have been my watch.
Oh, that's okay. Yep. Verse 10. Can somebody please read for us verse 10?
Now, when Daniel learned that the decree had been published, he went home to his upstairs room where the windows opened towards Jerusalem. 3 times a day he got down on his knees and prayed, giving thanks to his God just as he had done before.
Excellent. Thank you. This is a deep verse, so we're just going to sit here for a little bit and mine what's in it. When does Daniel go and pray?
3 times a day.
Well, he does. That's how frequent. He goes 3 times a day. Morning, noon, and evening, most likely, is when he goes. Morning, noon, and evening. But when specifically is it noting this time of prayer?
After he knew about the decree.
Yeah, he knows the decree is signed, and he immediately goes and prays to his God. Right? I mean, it's pretty intentional in the text. In fact, Daniel is so high up in the kingdom, he probably watched the signing. Right? I mean, this is a big move. He probably watched it being signed, and on purpose, he immediately goes and prays to his God. Right. So we have that bit to deal with, and we're going to deal with that. What do you see in the text before I bring out several things that we may not know? What do you see?
He deliberately went to the window that opened towards Jerusalem, so
Yeah.
apparently he thought they'll see me.
Yeah, he knew he was going to be seen, and he deliberately went to the windows in his upper chamber and opened them toward Jerusalem. Now, most likely that's probably part of his habit. Why would he pray towards Jerusalem?
That was part of the Jewish culture, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's where the temple had been. Okay, that was part of the culture. And so he's praying towards Jerusalem, not to Jerusalem, but he's praying towards where God's house was. Okay, and so he's praying towards the temple. And of course he's praying to God. All right, but that's what he's doing there. Now, here's the question for us. He has windows in his upper chamber. Normal or not in the ancient Near East? Have somebody shaking their head no? What do you all think? It's not normal. Usually what you have is you have a house and you have a roof, and you could be up on the roof, but it's just a roof. Maybe you put a lean-to up there sometimes if somebody's staying. But you don't have, what does it take to have windows? It means you have a 2-story house with actual walls. You're not just on a roof. The roof is above that. Okay? So this is an indication of Daniel's wealth. He's most likely well off, which makes sense. He was honored by several Babylonian kings. He's been in a high-ranking position for years and years and years. He's most likely well off. Okay? And his house is a signpost of this. He's not a poor person living, on the streets or having to go up on his roof. Right? He has a multi-storied house. Okay? Maybe it's in part of the palace. Who knows? What else do you see in here?
He knew where his strength and his protection came from.
Yeah, he knows exactly where his strength and his protection come from. They do not come from any human law or any human power, but they come from the Lord, which is why he prays directly to God. Immediately after knowing that he's going to be thrown to the lion's den.
If I was in that position, I would be scared. I'd be praying for help.
Yeah, we'd be praying for help. What would be our tendency, though, in that position?
Probably not to pray in an open window.
Bingo. Probably not pray in an open window, right? Well, Jesus did say to go into my innermost room and shut the door, didn't he? Yeah. John Goldengay says this, because he's, of course, aware of this text. And so on page 319, he says this. And this is a direct quote. When prayer is fashionable, it is time to pray in secret. When prayer is fashionable, it is time to pray in secret. Matthew chapter 6, verses 5 through 6. But when prayer is under pressure, to pray in secret is to give the appearance of fearing the king more than God. One must render to Caesar, but also render to God. Whew. Wow, he's got some zingers in this chapter. That was a zinger, right? Praying, when prayer is fashionable, go into the prayer closet. When it's not, pray out. Right? Pray in public. Again, that's not to bring attention to ourselves, but that is to say, I fear God. Don't fear anyone else or anything else. I fear God. Okay? Notice Daniel is still in his home. He's not on the public street corner. Right? He's not purposefully trying to draw attention to himself, but he's simply doing what he's done all his life. And that involves not praying in secret. He has his windows wide open. Okay? So that means for us, when the time comes, and they may start to say some things about Christians, well, we still continue to wear our cross if we've worn a cross necklace, right? We still continue to pray before meals when we're out and about, if that's been our habit, right? We continue to order our lives and do exactly what we have done. Unless what we've done is sin, in which case we we need to do differently already, right? If we're not praying, we need to start praying, that sort of thing. But we continue in the faith.
You think maybe he's thanking God for the help that he's going to give to him? He knows God that well that no matter what happens, he's going to help him.
Yeah, I think that there's an appropriate part of faithfulness that says, God, thank you for whatever help you do give. I don't think Daniel's afraid of death, though. And so I think he would be right with his friends. Whether God saves me or not, I will still worship the Lord. Right? Yeah, and he definitely gives thanks before God. So, the text does say he's giving thanks.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, maybe he's giving thanks for the protection that he will have. Yeah. What other comments or insights that you have here? Just looking at verse 10. We'll move on in just a few minutes. All right, let's talk about he got down on his knees 3 times a day. Why is it that we pray on our knees? Or why is it that when we're able to, and I realize that some people aren't able to anymore, why is it that we do that, though, when we're able to? Yeah, exactly. You've got it. It's humility. It's a marked self-lowering. It's meekness in the presence of authority, right? We're lowering ourselves down before God.
When I grew up, and I think
Yeah,
The
whole congregation would do that. Yep, yep. And there's wisdom in that. Now, I also just want to say for those who can't do that anymore, that we need to primarily lower ourselves in our hearts, right? Lowering ourselves physically and being arrogant in our hearts because, hey, look at me, I'm lowering myself physically, defeats the purpose, right? But to have both is great if we have it in our hearts at least, and that's important. But yeah, so there's a bodily thing. How many times is he giving to prayer per day? We've already said this. 3, right? 3 times. Morning, noon, and evening. How does that help us with a rhythm of or a balance of prayer in our lives? Maybe it would be good for us to take the example of Daniel and do the same. Not just praying at breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Maybe around those times, but actually taking a period of time, maybe 10, 15 minutes, and praying to God 3 times a day. How do you think our lives would begin to change if we took on that practice? Now, we get the fact that we're supposed to be praying unceasingly, right? So we're supposed to pray all the time. And so we know that, but I also think that, having 3 times of prayer, marked times of prayer, may change our lives and may change the lives of others as we pray for them. Right? Good. Notice that this is a lifelong habit of prayer that he's continuing in. John Goldengay says this on page 320. In light of your comment earlier, is he praying thanksgiving for the help that God will give? This comment dovetails into that. He says, Daniel is confident that the living God knows his situation and his peril, and that he has already determined how he will preserve him through it. Right? Daniel is confident that God already has everything figured out. It's already determined all things needed. Here's one other thing, and I really want to say this because I think it's a zinger here. He says this: Daniel's seemingly innocuous act or innocent act was more revolutionary than outright rebellion would have been. Rebellion simply acknowledges the absoluteness and ultimacy of the emperor's power and attempts to seize that power. Prayer denies that ultimacy altogether by acknowledging a higher power. Daniel assumes that awe for God is the beginning essence of insight, or the fear of the Lord is knowledge of the beginning of wisdom. He is prepared to pay the cost of discipleship. Right? Anyone familiar with Star Wars? Now, okay, we're Mennonites, that's all right. Well, in Star Wars, in these movie series, there's usually always a rebellion, and they're always small, and they're these soldiers who try to overthrow the war machine, right? They try to overthrow the empire. And in light of that, what Goldengay would say is actually when people do that, when they're rebels trying to fight against the empire, what they're doing is they are admitting that the empire has all the power. And all the rebels want to do is seize that power. What does prayer do? Prayer says, you don't have all the power. I'm going to go one up on you. I'm going to ask the higher power. I'm going to ask God for help in taking the empire down. I just thought that was fascinating. I'm just going to leave that there for us to think about. Because, of course, we also always have to be doing stuff. But I think that's an amazing zinger for us to think about. Prayer acknowledges that God is the highest power, not any form of human government or any person in human government. Okay. What questions or comments or concerns or pushback do you have or additions do you have? What do you think?
A good example for us today. Take the situation in the country to a higher power.
Yeah, is that a good example for us today to take the situation in our country to higher power? I think so. I think that's going to be the hope for America is in prayer. I think the hope for America is in revival, which takes prayer for that to come. So absolutely. Yeah. Okay. Well, let's turn to the last verse, Daniel chapter 6, verse 28. We'll finish up here. Just joking. I'm trying really hard to get through. We have a few minutes. Can somebody please read for us verses 11 through 13?
Then these men assembled and found Daniel praying and making supplication before his God. And they went before the king and spoke concerning the king's decree. Have you not signed a decree that every man who petitions you, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions? The king answered and said, the thing is true, according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, which does not alter. So they answered and said before the king that Daniel, who is one of the captives from Judah, does not show due regard for you, O king, or for the decree that you have signed, but makes his petition 3 times a day.
Got it. So the fowler's net is pulled. They've got him. They've trapped both the king and Daniel together. Verse 14, we don't want to leave on that note. Verse 14, then the king, when he heard these words, was much distressed and set his mind to deliver Daniel, and he labored till the sun went down to rescue him. I'm going to summarize verse 15. He couldn't figure a way out. So Darius is on Daniel's side. Darius really likes Daniel. I mean, he's trying. Great distress. No way out. Right? They've got him. And they've got Daniel by extension. Questions, comments, insights?
He was tricked by his own people.
Yeah, he's tricked by his own people, right? And well, we'll go there next week. Yeah, he's tricked by his own people. You've got it.
Wouldn't you think that because he was king, he could overrule that?
Could he have overruled it? He can't in that country because there's a law saying that he can't overrule. Right? If he overruled that, he'd have to over. I don't understand necessarily the ins and outs of the Medes and the Persian kingdom. We just know it's already said twice in this chapter, verse 8 and in verse 12, and then again in verse 15, that the law can't be changed once it's in effect. Why they have that, I don't know.
It don't work in our country.
Which is a good thing. I'm glad that it doesn't work in our country. The point is to be able to change. And so, yeah, because people can get in trouble. All right, thank you so very much, folks. We'll talk to you later.
Thank
Yep.
you.